My first question to you, though, you and I were talking all week about a potential ground invasion by Israeli forces into Gaza that we both thought was going to happen this past weekend. It didn't happen this weekend. Why do you think that is?
Andrew, it's kind of interesting. I have a sense that the Israelis have built in a rather extensive psychological operations component to include a little bit of strategic deception, if you will, along with working on their overall messaging in terms of strategic communications. The Israelis have no interest in creating a massive humanitarian crisis, nor in incurring a lot of collateral damage. Read that means civilian casualties in what they're doing. Already in what's been happening, certainly a number of civilians have been killed in some of the airstrikes. It's reportedly that some who are heading south may have actually been hit by airstrikes and killed, even though they thought they were going the right direction, the way the Israelis had told them to go. With all that said, I think the Israelis are being very careful and picking their timing. The other thing, too, is a lot of the forces that are going in need training, specific training on what to do in the Gaza Strip. And as we've talked about, that subsurface, surface, above surface, urban warfare. You have the what they call the Gaza Metro, the massive network of underground tunnels, which is actually longer than the London Tube. It's about 500 kilometers, about 300 miles of total tunneling. And that takes a little bit of training. That's just not the stuff you'd normally get. And certainly for reservists that have just been mobilized, and even for the regular forces, this just isn't regular training. So there's probably a lot of very specialized training they want to run them through prior to going in there. And so there's a lot of good reasons why to hesitate.
Okay. Hal, and consider the source, but we're getting some news in from Hamas that the number of hostages that we thought that are being held in Gaza by Hamas is even greater, potentially 200 to 250. And so I thought this was interesting as well. What is the hostage recovery plan? I ask you that almost every day, Hal. The Wall Street Journal reporting this today. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin saying as much, be prepared to deploy orders were sent to 2,000 U.S. troops for further defense of Israel if needed. I asked Chairman McCall just a little bit ago whether or not he thinks U.S. forces will be there on the ground. He said potentially, but in a training capacity. That doesn't seem like a training capacity, does it?
Well, some may be there in a training capacity,
Okay.
and some may be there to deal with things like improvised explosive device, what to do with that. There's going to be a lot of very specialized training things. And frankly, the IDF is going to need all the help it can get in being prepared for doing something like this. One thing to also remember is pretty much the entire IDF speaks English, so that makes the training a lot easier in that regard. Of the 2,000, it's not entirely clear, but I would mention that a Marine Expeditionary Unit, which is something that gets routinely deployed, is a little over 2,000 Marines and sailors. So that could be what they're talking about. I did see where the Rapid Response Force, and I'm not sure which one, but I think it's the one out of Europe, probably the one that I think is based up in Spain, has moved into proximity. Again, don't know where they are. They had talked about some special capabilities that I kind of looked at carefully because it kind of indicated they may have been augmented with some specialists and things that they don't normally have on hand. And it mentioned that they might be floating offshore, so I'm not quite sure how they're deployed. One thing that's come up over and over again is that there may have to be some additional support in going in to rescue the hostages. And in that regard, even though the Israelis have superlative commando capability, special operations capability to do this, you're talking around 200 hostages filtered around this large Gaza Strip area. Small in terms of total space, but in terms of trying to find individuals that are hidden in tunnels or in basements of buildings or wherever, it's a lot of different potential locations. And I think part of what you're seeing now is really what we call intelligence preparation of the battle space. They're watching very carefully, and even when they issued the evacuation orders, they were watching very carefully to see what Hamas did. They're looking at where Hamas missiles, when they launched those missiles, the ones that were fired at Senator Schumer and that group.
Yeah.
Somebody there is watching very carefully to see where did they pop up, because where they popped up might be near the entrance of a tunnel. And all this stuff is things that you mark on the map
I see.
that when you're going in there, you want to look for this stuff so you can go in and take it out. And I
Okay.
think that's some of the stuff that's going on. And that ties directly back to what they might do in looking for hostages.
All right. Hal, as well, because I was hearing you and I talked so much last week about the concerns that this would spill over regionally. And I think it's pretty safe to say that, Hezbollah is not on this anymore from the margins. Would you agree that they are in this full frontal? I mean, they keep launching these missiles in the north of Israel here. Also, we're learning, and I saw this as well, that a potential reason maybe that the ground offensive was not launched over the weekend was because IDF forces were concerned that if they put all of their resources and focus and attention there in Gaza, that would leave the north exposed. Is there any credence to that?
I've heard that as well. I think
Okay.
General Keane had mentioned that as
Yeah.
well. He thinks that was part of the reason. And I can't say that wasn't part of the rationale. What I will say is this: I have not seen Hezbollah weighing in with full force.
Okay.
What I have seen is there's been incremental increases in the amount of force that they're using, and I don't know what discussion has been going on, in back channels between Israel through various different means to get to Hezbollah to find out, where the ground truth is on what they're going to do. Hezbollah has a very vested reason for not getting engaged in this, because if they do, with everything else that has happened in Lebanon, the financial collapse, the destruction of most of their port area in Beirut, and that
Right.
in that explosion, their economy has shrunk 50%. They don't really have the resources in many different ways to really come at this with over a period of time, because it's just too damaging for them.
Okay.
So they may be, but on the other hand, they're committed
They're
politically.
still firing
to
a lot of
supporting
rockets, it
Hamas.
seems, though, Hal. I mean, they're still firing a lot of rockets there in the north and from southern Lebanon. And to your point about back channel discussions, Hal, it was reported over the weekend that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was communicating with Iranian officials, I believe, via a Swiss intermediary over the weekend. Do you think some of those discussions were about Hezbollah and its role or would-be role in all of this?
I think there is. I think the Iranians are probably putting pressure on Hezbollah to fire missiles. Again, it's with the missile thing. I say it's kind of relative. They're firing more missiles, but compared to what they could be firing, compared to what we thought they might end up doing, it does show somewhat. I know it sounds strange, but it shows some restraint with what they're doing. They have not entered in full force, but it is certainly enough to keep all the IDF forces in the north poised, leaning forward. In fact, there was even some strikes within Syria, southern Lebanon, and there was actually reportedly an incursion by the Israelis into Syria to take out something that was tied to Hezbollah. It wasn't quite clear what that was, but obviously you're sending ground forces on a raid. It must have been something fairly significant, and I found that to be an indicator that maybe they're concerned that Hezbollah is leaning forward. However, Hezbollah has not entered in, let's just say, in a more full-throated way into this thing, even though the rhetoric is always over the top. But in terms of their capabilities, I just haven't seen them weigh in. But on the other hand, I think there is some validity that the IDF may have held back. I think the big reason is I think they're looking at their own forces and what they're doing in Gaza, and they just need more prep time. And they want to make sure that this doesn't turn into a massive humanitarian catastrophe that will backfire on them politically in the international stage.
Yeah, and we're watching just some video from, I believe, earlier. This is IDF troops kind of staging and amassing there on the northern border. Hal, stay with us. We do want to take just a quick commercial break. The